Welcome back, humor consumers, to the Life Happens, Laugh Anyway podcast. I'm comedian Tracy DeGraaf.
And I'm Cathrine, co-host and bestie.
Yay!
And I just made a mental note of you saying humor consumers. Because at the end of our last one, I was like, do you say that still?
Yeah, I've been saying it every time.
I know.
Well, we're back. And I'm pumped about this topic.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, because who doesn't love Thanksgiving?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know too many people that don't love it.
Well, and plus we have been doing a little bit of research on history.
Yes.
And history did not used to be exciting for me back in my youth. Now I love it now. So that was fun.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're going to share with our audience all kinds of great things today about Thanksgiving. So we're going to get into that in just a minute. But we have sponsors. Cathrine, who are they?
Muffin and Pooh.
Oh, those are weird names. Who are Muffin and Pooh? Odd.
Ron and Kenny, our husbands.
Yeah.
Ron belongs to you, and Kenny belongs to me.
Yeah. And those are our little pet names for them. Mm-hmm. So try not to gag yourself.
Yeah.
As you listen to us.
We realize how gag-worthy it sounds.
But they're our sponsors, so we got to mention them.
Mm-hmm.
So just keep going to work, guys. Love ya. What we try to do here at the Life Happens, Laugh Anyway podcast is we bring you a topic every week, and we try our best. We curate the internet. Mm-hmm. We are curators, like museum scientists or whatever they call them.
True that.
Yep. For information, and then we do our best to deliver it in an entertaining way while you're there, lady, doing your lady things. I don't know.
What?
Well, I tried to think about when listeners are listening.
Well, not at the gynae.
That's not what I meant.
I know you didn't mean that, but that's what it sounded like.
Okay. Well, maybe that would be a good thing to get people to go to the gynae. Oh. We're going to tune into the Life Happens, Laugh Anyway podcast while you're here.
Yes.
Anyway, that went down a different road.
Yeah, that did.
While you're doing things that you do that you just want to pass the time with a podcast. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, you mean like farting.
Yes, farting with a D,
yeah.
Like getting ready for your day.
That's what you meant.
So we just want to encourage you to tune in on a regular basis. We drop new episodes every Wednesday at noon, and you can receive the show notes from our podcast via email weekly. Also, right after they drop, so like right after noon when it drops, then the emails go out, and that gives you just like a summary of the show, and it gives you links, important links if you're interested in that. And you can sign up for that podcast email at my website, which is Tracy with a Y, DeGraaf, DeGraaf.com. So there's my little commercial.
That was very good.
Well, I do know how to spell my name. It's been a while, but I did figure it out. That double A, it tripped me up at first, but it's been 32 years now. So yeah. It's like double A like the battery. And then F like Frank. Mm-hmm. That's my little claim to fame.
Very good.
All right, we better jump in because we got stuff to say.
Yeah, we do.
We have a few takeaways. This is what we're hoping you're going to get out of this episode. Number 1, history of Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Some interesting things.
Yeah.
Number 2, we're going to talk about the similarities and the differences between the first Thanksgiving and today, which, by the way, it's been 400 years this year.
Yeah, that's right. 2021.
Yeah.
And 1621.
Yeah.
Is when
400 years.
Yeesh.
400. Hoy. It's a lot of years.
Yeah, it is.
All right, so we're going to do that, similarities and differences. And then finally, we're going to end with the shocking truths of Thanksgiving, things that surprised me.
I can't wait for that.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. All right, well, let's just dive in. And of course, we're going to end with spiritual encouragement. So hang in there for that because we always bring something.
Try to.
We do.
And we do.
We do.
Deliver on that, I hope.
Yeah, that is the goal.
Yeah.
All right. What say you, Cathrine, about the history of Thanksgiving?
Well, one thing is there's always a big misconception about the Puritans. So we're talking Puritans, and which are Pilgrims, and then we're talking some people are confused about where America actually began and Thanksgiving. Was it the Pilgrims that landed at Jamestown, Virginia, or was it the Puritans up in Plymouth? Well,
Massachusetts.
Exactly. And it was indeed the Puritans that landed in Plymouth after Jamestown was trying to get established. So, and the Puritans were a group of people that lived in England, and they wanted to break away from the Church of England. So, because the Church of England had their own kind of added things to how to worship. In fact, if you tried to even not go to the Church of England church, you would be fined 20 pounds, which back then is like equivalent now to 9,000 pounds or dollars.
$9,000 for skipping church.
Yes.
Just missing like one worship service. One, I'm assuming that they were either worshiping on a Saturday or a Sunday. Okay, so you miss 1 week and your bill is now 20 pounds.
Yeah.
Cough it up.
Right.
What if you didn't have the money? Would they throw you in jail?
Well, we didn't get that far.
Well, just think about that. Like, what if they did that today? You missed church. It's going to cost you.
Well,
I think there'd probably be another revolution.
Thank God. God gave us freedom to choose whether or not to go to church, right?
Yeah. So,
Worship
okay,
him.
so these people that were the ones that eventually came to Plymouth, Massachusetts in 1621, we had the Thanksgiving thing. They, in the years previous to that, they were living under this really constrictive rule from the Church of England.
Yeah, there was, at the time when they broke away, I believe King James the First, but before him, I think was an Elizabeth, and she had this law that she put into practice before he did about, well, I don't remember all the details, but it was
Nutshell.
They would be punished in some way, but not the fine. The fine was later, I believe. And this King James had no tolerance for any kind of skipping his church because he was the head of that church. So it was just a small group. They wanted to worship God in the way that was pure and without these guidelines that the Church of England had implemented. And so they decided to escape and go to Holland, where they weren't as restrictive.
They were free to do what they wanted.
Yeah,
worship wise.
Right. Yeah, a little bit more. And so they were there 10 to 12 years, and then they were still proud of their English heritage, and so they were realizing that their children were growing up Dutch.
That's a problem. Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah. So then...
What? Are those wooden shoes? Yeah.
So then they decided to pull the ripcord again and to venture off to this place called America. And the big misconception is that they were for religious freedom and liberty. But it's actually really far from that. They wanted to be able to start a community or maybe even a nation where they worship the same way they do.
Yeah.
And because they had strong convictions.
They did.
And they believed that that's the only way that they, to worship, because it was pure, it was lined up with scripture and that sort of thing. So
they ironically were fleeing that type of oppressive entity, right?
To put it into
somebody else because they were right. And the other ones were wrong. And that's human nature.
It is. Yeah. Indeed.
All right. So they're heading off from Holland. They're saying bye-bye, so long, adios to Holland. And they're heading to the new world with new opportunities.
So they think. Well, and eventually it is that way. Yeah. So an investor hears about this and he says, hey, I got a boat for you.
The Mayflower.
That's right. But he was very late on his promise. He didn't get people to back him in investing. And so the ship sailed way later than they expected. They left in September. They really meant to leave in spring. They get there, and whoa, it's beginning to get cold, and it was very hard to get established. So a lot of people died. There were, and by the way, there were 101 people on this ship. So it's real small, and only a small portion of them were actually Puritans, which, by the way, too, Puritans was a name that people of the Church of England labeled them. It was kind of derogatory.
Right. Like those Puritans, those snobby Puritans, they have to have everything all pure. So it wasn't like a nice, kind, pious label. It was to make fun of them.
Yeah, they called themselves saints. But they were also called separatists.
Right. Because they were separating from the church.
Exactly. Well, this investor said, we're putting on some regular people, which they were
that
called
can make some money.
Strangers.
Yeah. So you got the strangers that they're just looking for some opportunities to make some money.
Yeah.
And then you
to
got
capitalize on these beaver coats that they had. So, so there was an agenda.
Yeah.
And they landed like 200 miles away from their destination, but the captain of the ship was like, I've had it. These people got to get off.
Yeah.
and so they did. And
200 miles, they were north of where they intended to be.
Right.
And at that time of year. And I mean, just looking at our map that I'm looking at right here in the pod lab and thinking about them crossing that giant North Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, and the boat was very rickety and had been used several times.
Yeah.
So just about falling apart.
Imagine what that was like. At night, right? It took them 2 months to get over.
Exactly 2 months.
8 weeks of floating around out there.
Yeah. 3 pregnant ladies, right?
Yes.
3 pregnant ladies. Some men. There were only like 42 men or something like that, or maybe almost 50, and a lot of them were mature age. So these people were not exactly, not at all,
ready to go.
Yeah,
they were
equipped.
Compromised
For sure.
Even just thinking about it makes me think they're lucky that the ship didn't sink.
No kidding. By the way, 30 of them were children. So
wait, 30 of the 102 were kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yikers!
Right. Yeah, because it was like almost. It was like 50 men, 30 women, 20 children. Or no, I'm sorry, 20 women, 30 children.
Wow.
I was thinking that. Okay, so we know that they left Holland because they realized their children were becoming Dutch and they didn't want that. But William Bradford and his wife left their child behind. I think perhaps that they were going to go back and get them, just like they were going to get their reverend, their preacher.
Right. So they must have, after 11 years or whatever it was of them living in Holland under that culture and everything, they must have been beat down enough you've got to be pretty motivated to get on an old rickety boat with a bunch of who knows who. Strangers, literally, and cross an ocean for 8 weeks. And you don't really know what you're getting into. You got to be pretty desperate.
Especially when they knew they knew that when they left in September, they knew it was going to be cold, but they didn't realize the harshness of it. They had to put the anchor down, what'd they say, like a mile away? It was far from the actual shore because it was so shallow. There was a lot of shallow area there. So they had to walk in the icy cold. They didn't even have a dinghy. A little rowboat.
What would we do, Catherine? We'd be like, oh, no.
I would be like, I'd rather die.
Yeah, forget it. We came all this way. We're not going the rest.
Mm-hmm. Well, the women probably didn't. They probably were carried across.
Yeah, maybe.
Didn't say.
Yeah.
But anyway, William Bradford did not document that.
Maybe he should have.
That we know of. You know what? He's got a whole book. Yeah. Perhaps they were. But anyway, so they tried to get established. It was difficult. And so now here they were in this foreign land, and they meet the Wampanoags, I think is how you say
Indians,
it.
The natives.
Indians.
Native American Indians, Wampanoags.
Which about 90% of them had been wiped out. And
because of a plague. Not a war with germs. Plague.
Yeah.
Some kind of a plague.
Sounds familiar.
I know.
Right. And so then here we have these Indians who they're trying to survive. The Puritans are trying to survive. And by the next spring, a sole Indian named Samoset. I hope I'm pronouncing.
Is he the leader?
He was he's not the leader. He was a warrior. But the leader was Massasoit.
Oh, Massasoit. That's the one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of the Wampanoags.
Okay, so Sam, what, let's just call him Sam.
I would like to do that.
Okay.
Well,
this is for the sake of not butchering his name.
Okay.
He's with the Lord now.
Yeah.
Let's call him Sam.
Okay. Anyway, so he greets them. And then once they kind of establish that, whoa, we want to be friends here. We're desperate. You're desperate. Let's get together. And the Massasoit, like I said, they just decided they needed each other.
So they created some sort of agreement, a treaty of some sort to help each other survive.
They did.
Okay.
Then their friend, okay, I'm going to say this, Tisquantum, he's the guy, the Indian, that helped them plant in the spring. So now we're in spring. Yay.
And he's also known as Squanto. That's a little nickname that they put out in the history books for him. So people might have heard his name as Squanto.
Yeah. Hopefully it's all, PC.
Well, whatever it is, that's how they refer to him. And he's the one, how do you say it? Wampanoag? Wampanoag. He's the one Wampanoag who can speak both Wampanoag, whatever the name of their language is, and English.
Yeah, which they're assuming that. They think that. But anyway. And so they plant. And then, and they just planted squash, beans, and I don't think they had a meat until later. Some people brought venison, deer.
Mm-hmm.
So they had the squash, and they had the beans, and one other.
You know what's interesting?
Corn.
It's interesting. I read about the differences between the Puritan farming practices that they brought over with them, the ideas and farming practices, and then the farming practices of the Wampanoag.
Yeah.
And they said that the Wampanoag farmed things, it was more organic, and it looked like a mess, because they planted things together. Where the English were like, what is all this? Where are the rows?
Yeah.
So it was truly kind of a relationship, right? Because they had to learn how to survive in this land. It's a different land.
Right.
Than where they came from.
Isn't that how history repeats itself? We get these ideas.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to change these things.
Right.
And then you get there and then you realize, that's not going to work here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they also had fish, cod and bass.
And wait, bring some clarity into the conversation in terms of now, what were the Indians wanting from the Puritans? So we know how the Indians were going to help the Puritans. Mm-hmm. They were going to help them eat. Mm-hmm. But what were the Puritans? How were they going to help the Indians?
They needed alliance because they knew if they got together, then the other tribes, Indian tribes, wouldn't dominate the Wampanoags.
So they were threatened.
They were definitely threatened by other tribes, Indian tribes.
Okay.
And because they had been wiped out so terribly by that plague.
Okay.
But still other tribes existed and they were going to be taken over.
So the Wampanoag, it sounds like they were more invested in the relationship for protection from extinction, wiping out with the other tribes. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Right. And so then they were able to enjoy the fruits of their labor at the end of the season. And that was the very first Thanksgiving. So this William Bradford, who we get a lot of our history on the Puritan side from his recollection, his writings, but he doesn't mention it. But there was another writer as well, I think Edward Winslow.
Yes.
Yes. And Well, the one quote that I have here that Edward Winslow wrote, and you're going to have more on that, is that he had said the Pilgrims gathered in a special manner, rejoiced together after we had gathered the fruit of our labors. I'm reading it exactly how it says on there. And even though there was no invitation to the Wampanoags, we know that Massasoit appeared at the feast with 90 men, and then they just
ate together.
They did, and they played games.
Yeah, and it was not just a couple hours; it was a few days.
It was a few
like
days.
A festival kind of a thing.
Yeah, it was a humble affair, according to this. And then years later, Abraham Lincoln made it an official American holiday.
A lot of years later, because Abraham Lincoln didn't come into the picture until 1860 something or whatever.
Yeah, centuries later.
Yeah,
is what it was.
Yeah. Wow.
So that is the short version of the beginning
history of it. Wow, interesting.
Yeah. So it's about alliance and abundance.
Yeah.
From the beginning.
And really survival.
And survival.
It's truly a story of survival, because if you think about the resources that the Puritans had back then, which even, from the start of their journey, they had all kinds of things that were threatening their success. And then if you even think about the resources that the Wampanoags had what did they have?
Yeah.
And so it was a survival story.
I'm reminded, just glancing at this paragraph here, that both groups had endured a lot of misery. They had lost so many people, both of them.
Yeah.
I think I forgot to mention that the Mayflower lost more than half of their crew, of their passengers.
That's a lot.
That's a real lot. So there was loss on that end. And not to mention what they left behind over in Holland, too, because that's a loss, too. They really longed for their preacher, who never made it over.
Yeah.
And so they were both coming out of mourning and grief. And to bring the celebration of being thankful, and they're lamenting.
Yeah.
So they had been lamenting, but then they were celebrating abundance and alliance.
And also to think about what it was like for them when they looked upon the rocky shores of the northern east coast of the United States of America, and they saw how rough the wilderness really was. I'm curious if perhaps they looked at that and went, what?
I got the chills just thinking about it, of this whole story. Well, and North America is so much colder than England, even though England looks about parallel, but their winters are
more
not
mild,
near as harsh as America's, which is funny because England is an island surrounded by the ocean. And so it just is pretty peculiar.
Right, because you don't know what they knew and what they didn't know. And because obviously there had been explorers that had been in the New World, they called it, but North America. They had been there for a couple hundred years already before what was it? 1492 that Columbus sailed the ocean blue. So that's a lot of time of people going and coming back. And what kind of stories had these Puritans heard about the New World?
Yeah, I don't know how much, because I know that Florida was mostly occupied by Spanish. And so I don't know how maybe there were a lot of English spies, which there probably were, because they were, the Spanish had set up in the Caribbean, like getting all the sugar and all that.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're getting really
it's interesting.
Roots. It is interesting.
It's interesting now, right? When we were in high school, we're like,
what time do we get out?
I gotta go home and watch the after school special.
Oh gosh.
Right. That's funny. All right. Well, let's talk about our second takeaway, which is similarities and differences. So what do you think is similar today that was also there, present in 1621, 400 years ago?
Well, it's still cold.
Yeah, cold. At least here.
It's still cold toward the end of November.
Yeah.
We still I think we still embrace gratitude.
Yeah.
I think that is something that we still embrace today. We definitely still celebrate abundance, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, we know not everybody gets together for Thanksgiving, but overall, it's still celebrated with a big meal. And then there's a lot of hype over harvests still. We're still an agrarian country for the most part.
Yeah.
Most of America is still farmland.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
I think that's a lot of similarities.
Mm-hmm. And food is a language that we
yes,
use food in so many different ways as human beings.
We do.
And in this case, okay, with the Puritans, I did read that they would, so giving feasts of Thanksgiving would come with usually a period of fasting prior to the feast.
Oh.
Out of true spiritual reverence to the Lord, to give him the honor that he is due for providing for them.
Oh.
You know, and I would say that obviously things are very different in terms of how we get our food, because I ordered mine on my phone this morning.
So did I.
I mean, I just sat on my phone and I went, bippity boppity boo, done.
I do have a garden, of course. It doesn't feed me all year long, but...
Well, so I think that human beings back then in the, 1600s, they were probably watching the skies a little bit more. I mean, if there was a drought, it affected them a little bit more. You know what I mean? And they didn't have large grocery stores that they could go to.
I just had a thought.
What's that?
What did they do? How did they preserve enough food for the winter to sustain them?
Well, they used salt as a preservative.
Oh, that's right, they did, but still.
Yeah, well,
I mean, all the animals that were around them, and they didn't break in that? Wow.
Well, I'm sure that they found a way. We're pretty resilient, and they probably dehydrated meat and then salted it and stored it so that animals wouldn't get it and such. But it is far easier today, friends. This is one thing to be thankful for.
Yeah, Instacart.
Instacart is my fave.
We just pull up, open our trunk, they put it in.
Put mine on the left and hers on the right.
Yes, that's exactly.
Catherine and I go grocery shopping together. And
no surprise.
I know. Whatever.
Yeah.
All right. So food is a similarity, even though there are some differences surrounding that. You mentioned gratitude, and then we also mentioned the gathering of our loved ones. Now, here it is 2021, so obviously last year in 2020, it looked very different. We're hopeful that we can really put the pandemic, COVID-19 2021 pandemic, in the rearview mirror and get back to not thinking about that, but we do still have to be very mindful of it. Because we don't want to hurt anyone. So we just have to be mindful of it and be careful.
Right.
Differences.
Well, today we have football.
That's a big one.
That is, because a lot of people celebrate Thanksgiving and football together because it's always played.
Yeah.
The NFL football anyway on that day. That's different. What else is different?
Well, the Macy's parade.
Oh, yes.
They didn't have Macy's back then.
No.
They didn't pull up on the Mayflower and go, look, Macy's.
I've got pelts. Let's turn it into a department store. Yeah, that's true.
And food-wise, I read that they had fowl, but it's unlikely that their turkey was like the turkey that we have today.
Yeah.
And they had deer. Ugh.
Yes. And fish.
And they, yum, yum. And they did it, well, for Thanksgiving, I think of our traditional, calorie-rich, buttery. How much butter do you put into your Thanksgiving dishes? I mean, a ton, right? Because you make the gravy, and you make the stuffing, and you make the mashed potatoes.
Sweet potatoes with butter.
Yeah. So the lack of the technology, the stuff that we have available today meant that they didn't have any buttery, sugary casseroles and treats and desserts and stuff. They probably had, just the more bland food. But they were just grateful to have food at all because many of their loved ones had starved.
That's making me realize another difference is that they were celebrating abundance because finally they had gained some food and some things to really celebrate. But I would say the big difference today in America is we're surrounded by abundance. I mean, we have no lack of food around us. I say that knowing that there are, there's still people who are hungry. I think that's always going to be around this side of heaven.
Yeah.
But overall, America is a country of abundance.
It is.
So that's different.
It is. So we can celebrate our similarities and we can celebrate our differences.
Yeah.
I mean, Catherine and I watched a documentary about the Pilgrims. It's called The Pilgrims. It was quite good. It's on Netflix. And it's a rental, though. I don't believe they offer it for free on Netflix, but it's only like $4.99, and it's worth it.
Yeah, and we're going to put the link. It's an entire synopsis of the film documentary.
Yeah, if you just want to read that. But when we were watching it, I was imagining us on the Mayflower. Like, could you imagine if it was us on there?
Pooh, Muffin, carry me.
It hurts.
Yeah.
There were 3 pregnant women, and I think at least one of them gave birth on the voyage, and then another one was mentioned of giving birth on the ship once they arrived and they realized that there was no hotel or any structure. They got there too late to build enough houses and such to give them shelter from the harsh winter, so many of people stayed on the Mayflower and just wintered on the ship.
Yeah, and one baby was born, stillborn.
Oh yeah, I did read about that.
Yeah.
So I mean, I've given birth 5 times and never had to go through that. So I'm grateful that we live in the time that we do.
Yeah, of course.
All right. Well, that about wraps up like some of the origins of our Thanksgiving holiday. Now I want to get to some shocking truths, Catherine, about Thanksgiving.
I'm looking forward to that. And I have just the one that we talked about earlier.
What's your shocking truth?
Well, it is so cool. So on the voyage over on the Mayflower, on the way over, a man called, I'm scrolling through here real quick here. Let's forget about his name for a minute. Oh, his last name is Howland.
Okay.
He had a big storm came and a big wave and it knocked him off the ship. And he went into
Poor guy.
Freezing cold water. He even went,
Mm-hmm.
underwater. Well, somehow he managed to grab a halyard on his way overboard, and he clung to it, and eventually the crew were able to haul him back into the boat. So Howland not only survived that and made it to America. Now remember that half of them died.
Right.
So not only did he make it to America, he was an indentured servant, by the way. He worked off his indenture, married a pretty young woman in the new colony named Elizabeth Tilley. They produced 10 children who begat 88 children, from whom an estimated 2 million Americans descended over the next 4 centuries.
Wow.
These included Ralph Waldo Emerson, Joseph Smith, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Humphrey Bogart, Chevy Chase, and both Bush presidents.
Wow.
Presidents Bush. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. And if he hadn't made it, you wouldn't have any of those things. All right. Well, that is shocking and amazing. And that just shows you the frailty of human life. And what was that?
That was a door.
Oh, whoops. Sorry. I told him we were recording. But
That's all right.
He doesn't care. All right. Well, let's go on with my shocking truth.
Yes.
Did you know that in 1939, we had 2 Thanksgivings in America?
No.
You had never heard of that?
No. Did you?
I hadn't either.
Oh, okay.
No. When I was doing the research for this podcast, I started to dig for like uncommon facts.
I love that. I like doing that too.
There were 2. And guess why there were 2 Thanksgivings? Take a wild guess.
Somebody messed up?
Nope.
And okay.
Nope.
All right. That's not
Nobody
it.
messed up. It was intentional.
It was intentional.
It was political.
Oh, I was going to say that.
It was political.
I was going to say that.
Well, I beat you to it. It was political. There was a Democrat Thanksgiving and a Republican Thanksgiving. For real.
Oh, let's hope that doesn't happen again.
Yeah. And FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who you just talked about.
What?
He was the president in 1939.
Yeah.
And the Depression was very depressing. And some businessman, his name is Fred Lazarus Jr., he was the founder of what's now known as Macy's. Okay.
Oh, my.
So this guy, Fred, he goes to FDR and he's like, look, we're struggling out here. We need more shopping time before Christmas. Can't we bump Thanksgiving up a week? He wanted to bump it up a week for that reason.
He had that much clout?
I guess. Well, FDR, he was probably looking at the state of affairs going, yeah, what can we do to help these retailers? Because they're struggling. Mm-hmm. Well, guess who hated the idea? Opposite party, because that's how we roll, right?
Yes.
If they just take that opposite view.
Oh, my.
Okay. So the Republicans hated the idea. And they're like, oh, no, you don't. So they started calling the date. So FDR and this Macy's guy, they chose the date that was a week before. Because previously Thanksgiving had been the last Thursday of November. Mm-hmm. Well, that year in 1939, there were 5 Thursdays. So that really squeezed the retailers with their opportunity to sell for Christmas. And it was always considered taboo to get things out prior to Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Okay, so whatever. So anyway, FDR and this Lazarus guy, they decide, yes, we're going to do it. We're going to go for it. Okay.
Full steam ahead.
Okay. So they're going to be the week before. Mm-hmm. So the Republicans started calling that date Franksgiving because it was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So that's Franksgiving. And the true Thanksgiving was the following week. Oh. Right? So now we've got Franksgiving and we've got Thanksgiving.
Wow.
I know. And I thought we were politically divided today.
Yeah, no kidding. So I wonder how they did that with days off.
What do you mean?
Well, because
it's recognized.
Yeah, it's a recognized day off typically.
Well, it wasn't yet a federal holiday. It was just like a presidential proclamation type of a thing. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if back then, if businesses and such would give their employees like a paid day off. True. I don't know what they did. Well, so we ended up having 2 Thanksgivings. It ticked off a bunch of people because all of the football people, hey, we've got our game scheduled for Thanksgiving, not Franksgiving, right? So that ticked, and they had announced it several months in advance, but all these college games and such, they had started having all their big rivalries on Thanksgiving Day because they got good attendance. They'd have like 10,000 people there.
Sure.
So that was one community. So you got the Republicans are mad, the football people are mad, and then
is it worth it?
Oh, you know who else was mad? The people that printed up the calendars. Because all the calendars had been printed with Thanksgiving as the last Thursday of 1939 in November.
So America was in a tizzy.
They were in a tizzy. Not only that, but, World War II was getting cranked up.
Yeah.
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 So you would think that they would come together, but no. Mm-hmm. So that lasted a couple years.
Wow.
It wasn't until 1942 that Congress passed a compromise. They had to actually come up with a compromise.
Wow.
Yeah. That from then forward, it would be the 4th Thursday of November that would be declared Thanksgiving. And it was a federal holiday. Kenny this.
I think we had a conversation about when Thanksgiving actually is.
Yeah.
You should tell him that whole business there.
Well, tell him to listen to the podcast. Mm-hmm. Except for that part about how we make fun of him.
Yeah.
Don't tell him that.
You know what else I think is interesting?
What's that?
Is that I also read that it was typical to celebrate a harvest over in Europe around the time of the Puritans.
Yeah.
But Thanksgiving is not celebrated in England, unless it is today. But I know that it never was before. So it's pretty interesting that they celebrated a harvest, but not.
Well, harvest celebrations and harvest Thanksgiving, right, had been prior to 1621 when our Puritans came over and did their thing with Squanto and the Wampanoags or whatever they're called and all that. It had been kind of a around the world thing, right? Because when you're suffering and you're starving, And if you have the belief that God is the one who provides you with food, so it had been a common practice. And they do have, did you know Canada has Thanksgiving?
I did know that. Yeah, it's not the
a
same
different
day.
Well,
yeah,
they probably didn't
month.
have all the stuff that we had. Mm-hmm. Okay, some other fun facts that I think are kind of just fun and unusual. Mm-hmm. Okay, Thanksgiving used to look a lot like Halloween, like people would dress up and stuff. It says at the turn of the century, Thanksgiving was kind of creepy. Children and adults would dress up in masks and host costume crawls in cities like New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago.
Oh.
The tradition of children dressing up as poor people in New York became so popular that Thanksgiving was nicknamed Ragamuffin Day.
Oh.
I have no
Is
idea.
that where that term comes from?
I have no idea.
You look like a ragamuffin.
Yeah, maybe. Second fact here, there are 3 U.S. towns named Turkey. Turkey, Texas, Turkey, Kentucky.
What?
And Turkey, North Carolina.
Wow.
That's weird. Okay, the author of Mary Had a Little Lamb is responsible for making Thanksgiving a national holiday.
Oh.
So the Continental Congress declared the first Thanksgiving in 1777. Okay, so that's like George Washington stuff. That's the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay, so they declared it. It's going to be, first Thanksgiving, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's 1777. We'd just become a nation, really.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the custom fell out of use around 1815. It wasn't until Sarah Josepha Hale, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that middle part right, but Sarah Josepha Hale, best known for writing Mary Had a Little Lamb,
Wow.
petitioned several presidents to make it a national holiday, that it actually became one. Now, this woman, she was a writer of like a popular women's journal.
Okay.
So I think she just wanted to share some turkey recipes and such, to promote her thing. She finally succeeded in 1863 when President Lincoln issued a proclamation. However, Thanksgiving didn't officially have the set date as the 4th Thursday in November until 1940. Now, they say 1941, and in another thing that I saw, it said 1942. So it was the early 40s.
Yeah.
And we have found that there are some discrepancies, they have just little minor things here and there. Mm-hmm. So anyway.
That is so interesting. I think it's neat, too, that when you and I were talking about our, outline and so forth, for this, you were telling me a little bit about, it was a woman who had a magazine or article, and she was pushing for this with President Lincoln.
Yeah.
But what you omitted was that she wrote Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Yes, she did.
Yeah, that's neat.
And part of her motivation for pushing it, and she never gave up. I mean, she didn't just petition Lincoln, but she petitioned, for 17. I've read some accounts said 17 years and other accounts said up to 30 years. So for decades, like for well over 10 years, she continued to push to get this as a national federal holiday.
Wow, cool.
So there you go. Way to go, Sarah.
Yeah.
Okay, Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade balloons used to float off all into willy-nilly into the sky when they were done with them.
Oh.
And they would pay $50 if you found the balloon remains and such. But they forgot that once they get high enough, they just pop. Yeah. So science matters, I guess. Turkey doesn't really make you tired. I hadn't had that idea anyway. I think it's just eating too much turkey makes you tired. Eating so many carbs and stuff.
I always heard there is a hormone in the turkey that does make you
tryptophan.
tired. Yes.
Well, it doesn't. Yeah. It's according to WebMD, which, who knows?
I was going to say that.
Okay, Minnesota is the kingpin of turkey production. Good old Minnesota.
And cranberries, I think.
Doesn't say, but
no,
let's go for it. The Thanksgiving date was once a marketing scheme, which I just went over about the Lazarus dude from Macy's. I did not realize this, although I should have. Jingle Bells was originally written for Thanksgiving. It was really literally supposed to be over the river and through the woods to grandmother's house we go.
Yeah. That
That was supposed to be for Thanksgiving.
Interesting.
But is it associated with Thanksgiving?
No.
Not even a little bit.
No.
Okay, each year the President of the United States pardons a turkey. Did you know that?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, the presidential pardoning of the turkey was formerly started by George H.W. Bush in a formal sense. That's a formal sense in 1989, even though several presidents, including both Abraham Lincoln and JFK, showed mercy to their turkeys when they were in their time.
Gobble, gobble.
Yeah. Okay, here's the thing about football. The Detroit Lions and the Dallas Cowboys play on Thanksgiving every year. Now, I had read that the Lions started it first as just a way of, like doing marketing and getting people to watch, right? Because people are home and they're like, they're attentive and they're eating good food and they're feeling great about life. And so let's get them to watch us play football on that day. And the Cowboys did the same thing. And I listened to an interview with Roger Staubach. I don't know how to say his last name, but he was the quarterback who was hugely successful for the Dallas Cowboys. And he said they did it, even though they only had a couple days to recover from Sunday's game previous, because he said usually it takes you a good 5-6 days to recover when you're playing National League, the NFL.
Yeah.
They did it. It was all to try to get people to watch the game and fall in love with the game.
So wait now.
Yeah.
Okay, this is how much I don't know football.
Yeah.
But more than those teams play on Thanksgiving Day now,
Well,
right?
they started it.
Okay, that's what I wondered.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
But they were the initial ones who went, you know what? This is an opportunity for us to really exploit the fact that people are home and we get TV here.
And men, what are they doing?
Right.
Well, some men will cook the turkey and cut it, but
another thing that I read at some point, now sometimes the lines get blurred, so I can't remember if I read it or if I saw it on a YouTube video or what, but they were looking for something for women and children to enjoy about Thanksgiving, because they had the football thing, right?
Yeah.
And of course the meal is the meal. And that's why they thought the parade geared toward entertaining children with the big balloons and all that stuff would really involve like the whole family. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
Guess what's the average number of calories that we consume today on Thanksgiving as Americans?
Ooh, okay. The average?
Yeah. On that day.
I'm going to say it's hot, like 2,000.
Way more.
No.
Way more.
Uh-oh.
4,500. I know.
Oh gosh, it's more than double.
I know. It's a lot. But when you think about what you eat on Thanksgiving and you're eating all day and then you eat at night, it's 4,500 is the average.
Plus eggnog, if you have that. I'm just thinking all the things. Oh my.
Yeah.
All the butter.
The butter alone is a big thing. Yeah. But that's why it's delicious. All right. It's only one day, people, so don't panic. Get to the gym. Okay. Butterball, the maker of whatever turkeys or
Butterball
I guess
turkeys.
they butcher them. I don't know what they do, but Butterball turkeys, they answer more than 100,000 turkey cooking questions through their hotline each November and December.
Oh, I love that fun fact.
Questions. 100,000.
What would they have a call? How?
Well, some people don't know. Like, how do you thaw a turkey?
No, I get that. I get why they do it.
Oh.
How does Butterball answer?
They have a hotline.
I know.
They have operators on the other end of the line. They actually have to have like degrees in nutrition and stuff.
I get that. But like, how do they handle that many calls?
They have a lot of operators, Catherine. It's 2021.
That's a lot of people to hire. Yeah.
They do it though.
Wow.
They do it. That's why I was always afraid of turkeys, like seriously. Because if something has a hotline and I'm going to be preparing it, I'm scared right away.
Yes.
I'm like, am I going to hurt somebody with this food? And we've had at least one fire in our oven. The turkey was on fire. That was one year. That's in my book.
Yeah.
The whole kitchen smoked up. Yeah. It ruined everything, whatever. Then there was another year I was trying to jam too much stuff in the oven. And I made this corn casserole and I forgot that it was going to get big because it had, that Jiffy cornbread mixture. And I put it in a pan, but I forgot it was going to get big.
Yes.
And it overflowed.
Oh, and then there was burnt smell.
Not only that, but flames, Catherine. There was a lot of butter in that, and it started on fire. And
I have a fail confession too.
what?
When Kenny and I were dating, I think I volunteered to impress his mom by saying, I'll get the turkey. We'll supply the turkey. So
When you're dating.
But you could cook it.
Oh, wait.
So
you were just going to buy the turkey and she was going to cook it?
I thought that was a big contribution.
Well, it was.
So, yes, we get the turkey. And back then, Kenny and I did the thing that young people do, which is go out Wednesday night. That's a huge night for young people to go out. So we used to do that. We didn't get in till really late. And I didn't realize that you have to defrost the turkey.
So you gave her a frozen turkey on Thursday?
But I think she knew me. And so she had a backup turkey, if I remember right. But I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I did not realize. And of course, I didn't read the label on the turkey.
Yeah. In case you're listening and you're new to turkey cooking, it takes about 4 days for that thing to defrost in the refrigerator. So if you're buying a frozen turkey, you need to kind of set your calendar, set a date, a little timer when you got to get it starting to thaw.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think I've exhausted all of my little fun facts.
Those are really fun. I enjoyed those.
Yeah, interesting,
I like to be
right?
on the receiving end.
Yes. I like the Franksgiving one. I never knew that.
Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me, though. It doesn't.
I have to say, I'm a little surprised.
It's kind of actually encouraging to me because when you look back at the beginning of this country and you look at all the history of this country, we're still here. We're still here and we're still strong. And yeah, we disagree about stuff, but in the end, we're doing the best we can. We're putting one foot in front of the other.
Yeah. You know, one thing I'm reminded of as you say that is that, you know, there in the beginning when the Puritans were coming over and the investor said, hey, take these other people with you. They wanted to capitalize on the beaver pelts and so forth. And so with that being said, somewhere along the article, it said, you know, to this day, we are still the largest economic success in the world.
Yeah.
Today, even still, which I really was kind of surprised about that.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking, well, you know, I know Dubai is very successful.
But they got all the oil.
Well, I know. But, yeah. Anyway, that also...
Haven't you seen the Beverly Hillbillies? And what that oil can do? Come on now.
I have indeed.
Yeah.
Oh, that song is coming to mind.
Yeah.
Let me tell you a story about a man named Jed. Poor man.
Barely kept his family fed.
Then
We're
one
so
day.
weird. Okay.
I love that song.
I do too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've had a great time.
We have.
And it's time now to share with our listeners a little bit of encouragement from the Bible.
Yeah, let me just wrap it up with this little thing to think about.
Okay.
That's at the end of this article. That Thanksgiving itself, our beginnings, it's a very humble story of people who don't have much, who suffer, and who have a communitarian ideal. It's a very interesting narrative for a superpower nation. There is something sacred about humble beginnings, a country that has grown so rapidly, so violently, so, I don't know how to say this word properly, prodigiously, needs a story of small, humble beginnings.
And it is truly a story of small, humble beginnings.
It is.
No matter how you look at it. You know, there's good in the story, there's bad in the story, but it's the story.
Yeah, and in regards to the Indians and the Pilgrims, they were both stripped of very many things. People.
Yeah.
And
They suffered much.
They did.
All right, well, let's look to the word of the Lord.
Yes.
1 Thessalonians. We've used the scripture before if you listen to our episode on gratitude, but we felt like it was fitting here because we are being thankful, gratitude. It's 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 15 through 18, and it says this: make sure that nobody pays wrong for wrong, but always strive to do what is good for each other and for everyone else. Rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances.
As they did, yeah.
For this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. So there's no promises there of puppy dogs and rainbows and an easy, existence. And I think that it's fitting always, Every single generation, every single person experiences some challenges in life.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get out of this thing unscathed.
No.
So turn to the Lord and pray and give him thanks. Rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances. And you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I love that it says in all circumstances,
That's
not
right.
some circumstances,
Right.
not the ones that you feel like and you don't feel like.
Right.
All of them.
Yeah. Well, you've been listening to the Life Happens, Laugh Anyway podcast. I'm still comedian Tracy DeGraaf.
I'm still Cathrine.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.